Okay, so this is where After Effects starts to expand and get complicated. Okay, as I said with your introduction with Photoshop last semester, you had a basic idea. We could have a layer in Photoshop and we could animate it. Okay? After Effects is a little different. In fact, it actually sectionalizes things. And so the way it works is this. In the timeline, we can have a whole host of different components that can be animated independently. Okay? And we will be doing that. And we can have, 100 layers animating, doing different things if we need to. We would simplify it a bit and we will start talking about it. But the building blocks are here. After Effects has a different layer set up for text. And your general shapes. Okay, they're the basics that you'll use. But this is where it starts getting a little more complex. We can actually start animating in a three-dimensional environment in After Effects as well. We can have a camera flying through an environment. We can animate lights in After Effects. This is where your computer needs the grunt to be able to do it. Okay, we can actually import three-dimensional files into After Effects. So it could be something like Blender or Maya. Adobe has a Cinema 4D. You'll have access to Cinema 4D Lite for free. It does cost to get the full render. But if you've had any experience with something like Blender, which is an open source free 3D, you can import 3D things into that as well. So you can have like a bottle or a 3D logo or a planet or anything 3D you can import. So After Effects will actually start having, whoops. Where are we? Okay, I'm just going to start with shapes today. Next week, we're going to be animating text. Okay, and we'll start talking about that in a little bit more detail. So what I've just done is I've created a layer. Okay, at the moment, that layer has nothing in it. Okay, it's just a layer. So we actually need to create that content. And you'll note along the top that we have some basic tools, okay? Like Illustrator, shape tools, okay, where we've got various shapes. We've got pen tool, so we can create paths if we want to. We've got the type tool to do stuff. We won't go too far, but there's basics there. Now, I generally recommend, if you're creating a complex logo, to build it in Illustrator and have it sectionalized as layers in Illustrator and import that into After Effects, because you've got a little bit more control over the design components in Illustrator, but you can do it in After Effects if you need be, and you will create basic shapes and the like. In terms of text, you can import text into After Effects from Illustrator, but it doesn't read as editable text. Okay, it comes in as a shape. So I generally recommend, if you're animating text, create the text native in After Effects. We'll talk about that next week. We'll be doing an exercise with that next week where we'll be animating a whole range of things. Okay? So let's just, I don't know, let's create a shape. So, I don't know, using your intuition, you might be able to work out that we've got a fill colour and it has a stroke. Even though we can't see the stroke, it's a white 2-point stroke. I came in and, whoops. Change the stroke, okay? You can see here, I'm just scrolling on the type size to actually work it, okay? Like Illustrator, we can have shapes with fill and no stroke, and shapes with stroke and no fill. And to do that, we click on the word, you remove the stroke. Okay, so you don't actually have to make 0-point stroke. You've got that there. Okay, and that can be edited and changed for as long as you need. Okay, so again, think in hex codes. Now that's going to be really important, especially with branding. If you design a brand identity, you'll have specific hex codes. Use those hex codes, don't try and match it by eye because you'll be out, okay? Especially with things like black, and that's almost black, and you start to see differences there. Okay, so what I've just done is I've created some content. You can see in the timeline, by default, it actually exists for the full 10 seconds, and you can see we have that 10-second duration here. There's a couple of things that are worth talking about, and we'll talk about them now. In terms of the animation, as we spoke about last semester, there are 4 basic techniques for animation that will be probably 80–90% of all the animation that you do. Position, start off screen, move on screen, start here, move there. You can move in an arc or a path, that sort of thing. Okay. Scale, things start big, get smaller, start smaller, get bigger, okay? Rotation, at the moment, we're dealing with 2D, so rotation is clockwise, anti-clockwise. Once we start getting into 3 dimensions, then suddenly a new axis is involved and we can have things tumbling, okay? Start getting a 3D head. We'll deal with that later. 3D is a different part of your brain, okay? If you've not done any 3D work before, you'll need to build new motor neuron pathways in that 3D environment. And opacity, fade in, fade out. Now you'll note that all of those have their own layers, so they can be animated independently. So unlike Photoshop, where it was all in one layer, now we can independently animate something moving and fading and rotating independently. Okay? So what we have over here on the left-hand side is we have these little stopwatch type icons. That begins an animation. We only click that once to actually set in motion, okay? And what starts to become important is this timeline marker, scrubber bar, okay? That, wherever this is, is where a keyframe will be created, okay? And that's really important. So when I spoke earlier about seconds and half seconds, okay, don't do it by eye, do it using your actually timeline here. Because it is possible to actually set up a keyframe at frame 24 and then have another keyframe at frame 25, and it animates between that because they are different spaces, okay? So triple click if we like, we can do that. 100, 1 second, okay? So this is where we begin things. So let's just say we'll do that. I'll click on that stopwatch, okay? And then to actually animate, well, I move my marker, okay? As I said, second, half second, just keep it simple. Now, over in my tools, like Illustrator, like Photoshop, always go back to the move tool, okay, the position tool. Once you've done these. Now, if I just move that, it's created a keyframe where that, okay? So very straightforward. So what I've done, I just hit my space bar. Okay? So these keyframes we have a lot of flexibility towards, because this keyframe I can actually move around. Okay, so now in terms of animation, if I hold down the shift key, it will tend to snap onto the marker, so that's a little handy thing. So in terms of animation, the journey, point A to point B, is the same, just the duration has been altered. So a shorter distance will mean it happens quicker. A longer distance between the keyframes, slower. So timing will be something that you will be developing. Okay? Now, what we can do, I've just highlighted this keyframe. I can copy that, and I can come over here, and I can paste it. Okay? So I can copy and paste keyframes. I can actually copy and paste keyframes on different layers. A little bit of a organisation needs to happen. Okay? So far so good. Okay, so now in terms of the setting, as long as I'm on it, I can actually move that off screen. I can move that off screen. Okay. But I didn't move that last one. Okay, so just note that we have a lot of flexibility with the way we do things. I can actually, all right, so I just moved a path. Oops. You can, like the pen tool, convert anchor point tool, so I can alter the path. All right. So all of those things. So that's in terms of the trajectory. That's how we do things. Okay. All fairly straightforward. Okay. Now, I'll just show you one more thing because it's worth bringing up. I'll just create a new shape layer. I can just hide things. Oops. I'll just create let's just say a star. Now, I've deliberately created this star here because I want to identify something that's actually really important. Okay? And the thing to note is when it's rotating. Okay, you notice where it's rotating? So that's called the anchor point. Okay? And by default, it's generally in the center of the document. So what happens if I want to have a star or a circle rotating from the center of the circle? Okay, which we need to do from time to time. If we want type animating around a circle, we need to reset that. Now, I'll show you the long way around. I need to move this anchor point. This is the anchor point tool where I can move things, okay? But layer, transform, center anchor point in the layer content, okay? Really important. Now, the thing is, you need to do that before you do any animation, okay? If you have animation already happening and you need to center it, then suddenly you're animating the anchor point and it just gets very awkward. So what that means is you need to know what you're doing before you do it, okay? You plan your animation, you build the content, then you animate it, okay? Very important. And so now, just in terms of rotation, there we go. Okay. So if I needed to, let's just say out here, rotation, if I want to rotate it 4 times. Oop, I need to create a keyframe, of course. Sorry. Now, if I want to add a keyframe, but not actually change anything about it, way over here, I can add an anchor point. Okay, so we'll just set that up. Just make that 0 for a minute. I'll come over here. And I'll say 4 times. Okay. So I can animate that. So it's important to note that animation is a balance between actual animation, movement, scale, rotation, and pause. Okay? You have a logo, everything is in its end position. We just want it there for a duration for the audience to actually, for the viewer to actually see it. So what we'll need to do is we'll need to create a keyframe for the beginning of a pause and the end of a pause. Okay? So keyframes are like punctuation in grammar. Capital letter at the beginning of a sentence, full stop at the end of a sentence, and then the commas inside the sentence can be points of change. Okay? So you need to think with keyframes for beginning and the end of a movement and a duration for pause. Okay? Because things need to hold for the audience to actually see it. So we've just done a few things. So if you like, you can have a little bit of a play with just creating some basic animation. Now, while we're here, I'll say one more thing, shortcuts. I'll open up another After Effects file that I have, and you'll be able to see the complexity that can be there. But you'll note that we have the transform properties. Okay? Don't worry about the anchor point, but position, scale, rotation, opacity. If I've got a whole stack of layers, 30 layers, and I've got all my layers open, I'm going to be scrolling a long way to get from top to the bottom layer. So there are shortcuts, okay? And these are the shortcuts. P, letter P. So I can just have the position layer available. S, the scale. R for rotation. And what about transparency?
Opacity.
It's not T, it's O. I don't know why they don't just say opacity. Okay? O is the no, sorry, T for opacity. Sorry, I got it mixed up. It's been a few weeks. So it's T for opacity because O will open something. Okay, so just remember that. And also, while we're here, we actually have the transform properties, but we also have the content properties, which have animatable things. So wherever you see the little stopwatch icon, that's where it can animate. So let's just say here, I've created a keyframe for the color. Okay. So wherever you see the little stopwatches, you'll see a whole lot of possibilities. Okay? So we'll keep things simple for the time being. We will be definitely talking about all of these down the track, but just for the time being, okay, look at this. I've just closed up the transform and the actual properties, and you can see that there's keyframes there, but I can't access them until I actually open up and play with them. Okay? So have a little bit of a play. Now you can have a host of layers doing things, interacting and working together. As many layers as you want. Okay, so just have a bit of an experiment with the animation of the layer and the shape layer. Okay, We're away, because we'll talk about all of these, and there's a whole lot of other stuff that is there, but away you go. Okay?